Are you ready for a story? Get yourself nice and cozy wherever you are, because we have got an awesome story coming your way. Hi guys, it's Kat here from Kingsley Co, your story keeper, and we are having today's story of The Frog Prince. So get yourself cozy, make sure that you are comfy, and let's begin. There was once a beautiful princess in her most favourite golden dress, and she was outside of her beautiful palace playing in the garden with her favourite golden ball. Now, this princess, she didn't really have anyone to play with, but she didn't really mind that. She was happy playing by herself. So instead of getting to play throw and catch with someone else and throwing and catching, she instead just had to toss the ball above her head and then get ready to catch it. And she would toss it and she would catch it. And she played this game so much that she needed to challenge herself a little bit. So she kept going, and it was all about how high she could throw the ball. And she kept going higher and higher, and she tossed it and caught it. But one of those times, she threw it so high, it didn't come back to her, but she heard a splash. Oh no, she thought to herself, what's happened? And as she looked around, she realised that she was beside the pond of the garden of the palace. Her ball, it must have fallen in the water. She went over to the bank and looked, but she couldn't see it. What was she going to do? She gave up looking and she just sat there and sobbed. Oh, the tears were rolling down her face. She was so upset. It was her favourite ball. What was she going to do? Inside the pond, there lived a frog. As he was going about his business, what was that he could hear? He heard the princess's sobbing, and he swam up to the top of the pond, got himself cozy on one of the lily pads, looked at her and said, "You all right?" "No, I'm not all right," the princess wailed. "My favourite ball! My favourite ball!" "Do you not want to just go in and get it?" the frog said to her. "Do I look like I'm ready for a swim?" the princess said to the frog. "Don't you know this is my favourite dress?" The frog looked a little bit bewildered, but turned to the princess and said, "Do you want me to go and fetch it for you then?" The princess's tears stopped at once. "Would you?" she said to the frog. "I'll go get it for you," said the frog, "on one condition." "Anything! I'll do anything for my ball," the princess cried. "You have to make me a promise," the frog said. "I'll promise anything, whatever you want. Just go and get my ball. Go and get my ball." "Okay," the frog said. "I want to have a friend. I want you to eat with me. I want you to read to me. And I want you to give me a good night kiss." The princess by this point wasn't really listening to the frog anymore. She was so fixed on getting her ball back that she didn't even really listen to what she was promising. I promise, said the princess. "I promise I'll do whatever." The frog took that as a promise, and in he hopped to the pond again. Well, he was a frog. It took him no time at all to find the golden ball of the princess's. He nudged it with his nose, brought it up to the surface, and plop onto the side of the pond. The princess had snatched it up within seconds of the frog putting it down. And, without a second thought, she turned, started to throw her ball up in the air again, and walked back to the palace, leaving the frog sat next to the pond. That is not where our story ends, however. Later in the day, the princess was sat with her father the king, ready to eat their dinner, when there was a big knock, knock, knock at the door. "Who's that?" said the king. "I'm not expecting anyone." The princess, having forgotten all about what happened earlier that day, got up and went to answer the door. As she opened it, she couldn't see anyone. She looked around, and it wasn't until she heard a ribbit that she looked down. The very same frog she had met that morning was there at her door. Slam! Without even thinking about it, the princess slammed the door into the frog's face. "Who was that?" said the king. "No one," said the princess, trying to sound innocent and failing. The king knew his daughter pretty well by this point and could tell she was trying to hide something. So up he got to answer the door for himself. As he opened the door, the frog hopped inside. "Who's this?" said the king. No one," said the princess. The frog proceeded to explain to the king that the princess had made him a promise. The king, like a lot of dads, took promises very seriously. He turned to his daughter and he said, "If you made a promise, that is something you must keep." "But Dad," the princess whined, "he's so gross. I don't want to hang out with him." The king rolled his eyes and did not look impressed. Some of you might have had a look like that from your dads before, so I know that you know what I'm talking about. It only took that one look to make the princess quickly change her tune. Instead of whining, she went and she shuffled, quite grumpily, back to her seat, pulled out a seat next to her for the frog, and let him hop up to the table next to her. As she was eating, she did her first part of the promise and let him eat with her, very begrudgingly. I think at this point the princess was hoping that that was all she had to do. But it turns out frogs have better memories than princesses, and he had remembered everything that the princess had promised him. So as the princess got down from the table and started to shuffle off to her bedroom, guess who followed? The frog hopped alongside her, really just wanting a friend. The princess wasn't having any of it. Arms folded, stompy feet out, she went to her room and sat on her bed. The frog tried to jump up next to her. She was not having any of that. She picked him up, something like this, with a really disgusted look on her face, and plopped him down on a chair next to the window. She went back to her bed, buried her face in her pillows, and tried to pretend she was asleep. This time, it was the princess's turn to hear something happening. She also heard sobs, but this time they were coming from the frog. She was so upset that she had made someone that sad that she went and she fetched the frog. Still not really wanting to, she put him on the bed beside her. Okay, she thought to herself, it's not really fair to make someone sad on purpose. Fine, I'll read to him. So she got out a book. She opened it onto her favourite page and began to read. The thing that surprised her most, though, she actually quite liked spending time with the frog. It turned out he was funny and he was really smart. So as she was reading the book, she almost forgot what she was doing. She started to giggle. She started to smile. Then, all of a sudden, she remembered what the next part of the promise was. She'd eaten with him. She'd read for him. Now it was time for the good night kiss. Her stomach churned a little bit. She remembered he was a frog. He was slimy. She didn't want to do it. But by now she'd realised a promise is a promise. So she closed her eyes. She screwed up her lips and quickly gave the frog a kiss. And then she rolled over and she covered herself and pretended that it never happened. The next morning she woke up. But instead of finding a frog next to her, there was a man. She jumped out of bed and screamed. But the frog, who now was a prince, turned to her and said, "I'm sorry to scare you. Don't worry. It's me." She recognized his voice. It was the voice of the frog. She was so confused. But the prince explained that he had been put under a curse by a witch, and he wasn't going to ever become a prince again until someone became friends with him and did all of those things that the princess had promised to do. So now, instead of having to throw the ball to herself, the princess finally had a friend that she could play catch with. They ran out into the garden with her golden ball and proceeded to play endless games of catch. I quite like that story because even though the princess wasn't my kind of person at the start of the story, at least by the end, she realizes how important it is to keep your promises. Thanks for listening.